All right, thank you all so much for attending today. We really appreciate you all being here to hear more about kind of our process and how we really approach kind of component-driven redesigns. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off for this, but we'll be back on later for the Q&A. So just as an intro, my name's Kelsey Boyd. I'm a senior strategist at Atten. So for us, that typically means focusing really on facilitating collaboration with users and stakeholders at the beginning of processes and really getting a sense for how that can be structured into the frameworks for design and for the redesign of different sites, whether that's through narrative content strategy or information architecture I should say. This session is really going to build on last month's session with my colleague Ken Woodworth, which was based around component-based web design. So if you're interested in learning more about what we're doing today, Ken gave some great advice around how to implement this kind of approach, and would really recommend taking a look at that. But really just to pull back a little bit and kind of start with the basics, let's just kind of talk about what we mean when we are talking about components. So I really like to think about this approach as being very Lego-like. So if you can think about kind of the baseline template of what we're creating as your kind of panel, we're really focusing on what are the parts and pieces you need to tell your story. So what are the different tools? What do we need to add to your toolkit as an author to be able to kind of build the content, the narrative, and really kind of connect with your users. So the way that we start this process is always just understanding where do we want kind of our users to end up? What is the flow that we want to move them through, either in terms of their goals and how they approach you as an organization and approach your website, or where you want to kind of guide them as an organization and what's really important to you. So just to start with a quick overview of kind of some typical components we work with across Drupal and WordPress and the general approach with these two main platforms that we find most of our clients are in. So just starting with kind of an example of an in-process project and looking at some of the components that we're typically looking at with a Drupal project. So often we're looking at some of the key components being our rich text fields, things like some of the basic content to really just kind of add copy, add photography to your page. We're often looking at adding different types of pull quotes, really elevating voices from across an organization or telling the story on the page, highlighting different individuals, giving easy points of contact to engage with around the content on a page, key resources, and really giving a level of kind of visual appeal and context to some key documents, external links, every kind of resource that a user might be looking for in kind of support of the content on the page again. Key callouts and really guiding users to some of our key CTAs, key points of contact, key points of content, to really kind of guide the overall user flow, give a large kind of visual presence to some of those key goals that we have on a page and where we want to kind of pull users to across the site. Looking at flexible columns, again, really elevating kind of the design, consistency, and appeal of adding content and having components and tools to do that. And then looking at kind of news features and how we would do that as well. And so what this ends up really looking like and what is in your toolkit is a set of very responsive, different types of variations and really engaging components. So for example, again, that call out of where we're guiding users to those key goals, key pieces of content, providing different variations around what that looks like in terms of the design, and really thinking about this as being very responsive to what fields are added. So whether or not there are images or the number of columns and the number of callouts that are added, really providing a lot of flexibility to use these parts and pieces to tell the story in the way that works best for you. And just to clarify, we're often, when we're talking about components in Drupal, referring to our tool Mercury Editor. And I would love to hear a little bit more about who on the call kind of knows a little bit about Mercury and what your all's exposure is to the tool. So I'll give you a few minutes for that. Great. All right, so it sounds like there's definitely some interest, but I would highly recommend going and taking a closer look at our landing page for this, atten.io/Mercury. But Mercury really is a powerful tool for drag and drop publishing within Drupal. So this is a custom tool that builds on layout paragraphs and provides the ability to have a really engaging UI for the author and for that kind of authoring experience that creates more flexibility around using components in a design and creating, again, kind of very flexible content across a Drupal site. So getting into WordPress, so looking at some of the similarities and differences, again, this is an in-process project for the city of Oxnard, but just to get a sense for some of the components that we use in WordPress. So again, looking at some of these kind of basic components, images with some level of stylization, departments, so giving really easy abilities to add, again, those points of contact. So for Oxnard and for many cities that we work with, noting that often audiences don't know which department or division to talk to and how the different services are kind of organized within the org chart of the city. So really providing really key components to guide users to those points of contact and making it easier to understand who to reach out to. Again, adding some visual appeal. For Oxnard, we were really focused on the use of iconography to connect with a largely Hispanic population, but again, adding that with the way that we communicate external links, having a consistent design language that again incorporates that rich text field, some of our core components like buttons, accordions, and again, kind of giving the ability to take a large amount of content and a very dense amount of content and provide a really digestible, easy to kind of skim through, but also to expand and dig in more for our audiences. Again, looking at really ways to incorporate helpful links, key resources, providing some visual context and consistency for content that might be otherwise pretty dry and very text-based. So really giving visually compelling tools to tell that story and include that content. Pull quotes, again, looking at some of our responsive tools, so whether or not there's an image or a headshot to be included, and embedded video as well. So for WordPress, this is often referred to more as blocks, but the concept is the same as components. But for post blocks, again, we're really looking at this responsive approach, having the ability to really display these components dependent on what level of information is added. So whether or not there's an address or hours, really giving the ability to have a tool and a block that works well across different contexts. Events, news, so really seeing this as a very consistent approach. But just to kind of recap what the similarities and differences are, so both Drupal and WordPress, the component-based approach to this is really looking at a responsive, easy-to-build approach to page authoring. With both platforms, you have the flexibility in how you configure the components, and components can be placed in any order on the page. But where it gets more different is, so Drupal provides a lot more opportunities for complex, granular content management. This might mean creating customizations around which components can be placed on which content types or templates, individual pages, or giving specific user permissions around those components. And while WordPress is really meant to be easier to use for non-technical users and just have a little bit of ease of use for kind of out-of-the-box solutions. But this means that components are available across all post types. You don't have as much of that custom control, but it works really well for kind of jumping in and easily having components that you can work with. So now that we've gotten a sense of kind of our overall approach to components, I'm excited to share a little bit about how we do custom components for our clients and what that can look like in terms of really creating tools that elevate an organization in the way that it is supporting its users. So we'll be starting with a project that's in process for the Lemelson Center, which is an arm of the National Museum of American History within the Smithsonian. So for this client and this project, we were really focused on getting a good sense of the different types of audiences and interviewing a breadth of individuals from across the Lemelson Center, from archivists to curators, different types of educator, program directors, and more, and really getting a sense for the breadth of audiences. So everyone from formal researchers to people who are curious about a topic, kids who are looking for an activity to do online, and all the way into more of kind of the formal funding and partners who will drive kind of the success of the institution. In terms of how we kind of captured this, so this project really was critical to understand kind of the story of what we wanted to communicate to audiences. So knowing that often a individual is coming to the Lemelson Center site looking to learn more about the history of an invention or an inventor, and really has a specific idea in mind of what they're looking for. Whereas the Lemelson Center team really has high-level goals around how they want to pull users from those initial points of contact with the site into their kind of mission and why they do the work that they do. So our work and project for them really started to focus on supporting their mission of researching and inspiring inventive identity. So really doing this by encouraging exploration and showcasing content that feels relatable to a diverse set of audiences. So really ensuring that we have a very accessible type of content for a wide variety of users. So this process for us typically starts in the wireframe phase. We're often looking and kind of breaking down what are those parts and pieces to tell your story and to connect the content with users. So really getting a high level sense for what are those parts and pieces that will need to be designed and built down the line, but starting to really get a sense for what those are before we engage with the full design process. So often we're looking at aspects, again, like those kind of boilerplate rich text fields, but also related media and what that looks like, how we're tagging those content to relate to other parts of the site, adding image galleries, accordions, making sure that aspects, again, that relate to their core mission of inspiring inventive identity for diverse audiences, giving the ability to have components that showcase those types of individuals and allow kids of all backgrounds to see themselves in similar faces and similar backgrounds and understand the ways that they can kind of identify problems in their own lives and take the Lemelson Center's inspiration to kind of approach innovation in their own context. So we're doing that both through components like individuals, related pages, again, pulling users from the content that initially drew them to the site and allowed them to discover a topic or an individual and bringing that into the overall themes that guide that frame that work and really give a context for why the Lemelson Center researches the topics it does or the kind of types of work that really provides an overall mission for the work being done. And then looking at how we take, again, their mission and incorporate that into specific types of tools that support their story. So beginning with inventive identity prompts, which is a tool they use in their in-person exhibits to engage users and help them think about how they can take what they're seeing and apply it to their own lives and provide the ability to have these kinds of prompts as a way to engage users with the content, to bridge the in-person and virtual experiences, and really give a key tool for communicating the mission across the site. And we're also looking at some of the key aspects that can really elevate and provide a component design sense of ease of ability to skim content, whether that's key facts and engaging users or guiding them to some of those features. So taking a look at what that looks like in the real world, and I knew that Figma was going to give me give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So in terms of what this looks like in the real world, that did not about. No, that's these. Apologies. Always fun. Let's make sure we have the right one. Okay. Sorry, we're having a Figma day, I'll tell you what. Okay. All right, so getting into, again, kind of what this looks like. So again, we're looking at a template for what an article of kind of formal research looks like, providing a really compelling, inspiring design that kind of connects with researchers and kids alike and really provides this kind of innovative, very impactful point of view in terms of the design language that we're setting up early on, providing key tools like our fun, kind of delightful headers to engage with kind of this design language throughout the site and provide an easy tool to add that, ways to add content and images to bridge to the collections, adding in these key facts and the ability to add in the kind of sense of delight and ways of engaging with the content. This is a Drupal-based site. So we're really looking at, again, kind of leveraging Mercury Editor for this project. Again, this is something that we're looking at rich text fields to incorporate some of that flexibility of adding in copy, but providing more flexibility on how images, how embedded media is starting to be incorporated. Again, some of those fun facts. And again, elevating diverse voices. So providing the ability to have individuals be showcased in a really visually compelling environment and to really kind of think about how that can be used to increase diversity across the site and drop in components into the actual, into pre-existing content as well as into future content as well. So digging into a little bit more of that, looking at the guitar gallery and how we're incorporating kind of the overall Smithsonian collection, again, incorporating this in a way that does creates a consistent design system that incorporates other aspects of the site and kind of bridges that historical content to some of the more contemporary media that we're adding, as well as adding consistent components that speak to some of our user needs. So touching on the formal researchers that are a significant portion of our audience who are really looking for formal sources, whether they're doing homework and they want information on a African American inventor and are looking for other resources on that, or if they're doing postdoc work, really providing clear tools for kind of drawing users to that information and providing a really easy tool to kind of recreate content that all users in that kind of section of the site might be looking for. And again, really looking at how our inventive identity prompts are starting to be used throughout the site to provide a sense of delight, but in a way that really reinforces the Lemelson Center's mission of inspiring inventive identity. So allowing users and allowing them to have this tool that incorporates this sense of delight, incorporates this visual appeal that drives users to see how they can invent in their own lives. And again, thinking about how we can do this as well in ways that bridges our past content, future content, and really uses taxonomies across the site to do so. And again, what does this look like? Kind of what is the set of tools? So looking at some of our kind of how we're creating, again, a sense of hierarchy, the ability to add in different types of labels and different types of headings, which provide a sense of, again, that narrative hierarchy, giving the ability to showcase information in different ways, highlight key callouts. So anything that is really driving users to a key message or a key part of the site, adding in images. So again, really visually driving users to parts of the site that might not have been where they were originally looking to kind of engage with, but really kind of drives that visual appeal to call out certain types of content to drive users to where we really want to guide them in order to kind of further the Lemelson Center's mission, providing more flexibility around incorporating links and relevant information, and really doing that in a very broad set of ways that can really elevate the toolkit that the team will have to tell this story. So we also see this in parts of the site that are, while we looked at something that was more around formal research, this is now looking at something that speaks to more of that kid and educator audience, seeing this as being something that is a activity and again carries that consistent design system and design language from the formal research and into a very different audience and a very different part of the site. Again, using some of our Fun facts are different types of steps and labels, headings to tell the story, to add content and add imagery. Things like the image galleries, again, bridging the Smithsonian collection and really reinforcing that brand hierarchy and really affiliating the Lemelson Center even more with the Smithsonian than they are now. Incorporating accessible media, driving some of those key callouts and key downloads, key resources, key links. And again, really using the inventive identity prompt in as many capacities as possible to further the mission of Lemelson Center. So what this looks like and kind of our final result for this is really thinking about how our components are used across a variety of different types of content. So whether that pull quote is used across a basic page or an individual's profile, really creating custom controls around how we can use these components, but where it doesn't make sense to use them, such as in events or activities. And this is being used in conjunction with kind of a broader set of deliverables to clarify how this relates to some of the more templated and required fields, migrated content, taxonomies, and more, but really giving a sense of what is a very accessible authoring toolkit that conveys that mission in a way that then builds on the kind of content infrastructure across the site. So our next section is based around how we use custom components to connect people to content and how we build that personifying or personable experience on the internet. So for this, we'll be looking at, again, in-process work that's Drupal-based and is focused on the Environmental Defense Fund's employee intranet. So for this process, given the type of engagement, the type of uses on the site, and the breadth of engagement, we were really focused on diving into quantitative data analysis, getting a good sense for how often employees are using Insider, how frequently they're using different types of tools, and what is being used by power users, what is being used by all users, what isn't being used at all. And then working with staff in virtual workshops to identify how some of these key needs can be improved, where there's opportunities to elevate the experience. And one of the key aspects that we heard from the employees was the goal of really bridging the people of EDF to the content on the site. So for this project, we're really focused on creating an intranet that uses content and components to bridge EDF's people to the groups, the departments, employee resource groups, leadership, to the resources. So any kind of documentation, formal report, article, policy stance, all of these things are things that we really want to create a consistent and connected ecosystem, essentially. So connecting content so people can find, who do I talk to about a certain group? What is most up to date with that group? And who do I contact about a specific resource or document? So for this, we're looking at engaging both these types of content connections within the intranet, but also looking at how we can leverage existing data streams outside of the site to supplement the kind of content authoring and kind of make sure that everything is up to date. So especially we'll look at a lot of content from Workday and Slack that we're using to really kind of elevate the design system across the site. So again, starting with our wireframes is always getting a sense for our components, where the client really wants to make sure they have the ability to manually add featured updates, distribute key messages, add news and updates. So really being able to showcase information and news from a variety of groups, resource areas, and then creating a point of contact component that really elevates the individual that is connected with this content. So this became a big part of our project, is how to visualize a very, again, information dense, text dense site into something that feels human and feels like it connects to people. So this is, again, bridging with different types of resources, creating better hierarchy and categorization, the ability to condense and expand dense content. And what this ends up looking like is a set of tools, a set of components that, again, creates this design system that tells that story. We're looking at different types of images, featured updates with that responsiveness based on whether or not there is subtext or imagery or not, providing more hierarchy and the ability to better organize different types of resources and links, elevating some of the kind of program updates. So with some examples from their kind of main site, looking at what this looks like to incorporate authoring headshots and getting a little bit more into that. Again, similar to Lemelson, providing really visual components to drive users to any kind of content that is motivating around mission, values, the overarching organizational drivers that we really want to make sure are constantly kind of kept top of mind in context of other work. And jumping into that point of contact. So really elevating how we incorporate the integration with Workday, with individuals' headshots, their titles, reporting structures, and doing this in a way that elevates the design, elevates the human aspect of how we can put different aspects of employees or different sides of the organization in touch with each other and create those relationships. So this, again, becomes very responsive, is very flexible in terms of how we provide different abilities to bridge content and connect people to different pages or resources across the site. Everything from really big splashy points of contact that really highlight the individual and becomes a main piece of content on the site to something that feels more condensed and is really easy to drop into different types of materials. And creating this in a way that, again, bridges some of the other types of content on the site, from events to articles, and doing this in a way that creates a very consistent design system that communicates the brand language across the site. This is also incorporating elements like buttons or links. These are aspects I would definitely recommend if this is this kind of approach is described in my colleague Ken's component-driven design web. I'd really recommend kind of taking some of these learnings from what we're looking at today and incorporating some of this approach. So our last one is how we're using custom components to connect complex data. Another in progress site. So this is something we'll see a little bit of process on work we're doing for the Tampa International Airport. This is a site that has a really broad range of input, so around 2 million visitors per year. This drove us to really engage in a quantitative data-driven way, engaging users in surveys and hearing from about 1,200 individuals, partners, passengers, different departments from across the state, from across the airport, and working with individuals across both of those groups to understand both where what experiences are most important, where there are challenges, and how the site could grow to both better inform the user experience and the organizational goals. For the airport, a lot of our goals around the project were incorporated with how can we elevate revenue driving tools. So for many airports, the concessions are a huge revenue driver. So things like ordering ahead becomes a really important component for us to incorporate to drive that revenue for the airport. Another big piece of what we were looking at with our components and how we're starting to build out how content can relate across the site is incorporating the flight status to create a dynamic ability to track a tenant's opening hours. So depending on whether or not for many of the concessionaires around the airport, they're open until last flight. So creating a dynamic experience that bridges that data into the content and creates the ability to create dynamic components that carry a lot of information and connect content across the site. So we'll be seeing this kind of dynamic open close tag that really provides the ability to see very concisely whether a retailer is open or closed depending on current flight statuses. And you know it. So looking at how that starts to appear kind of on an overview and how that content bridges across the site, this is something where we're really looking at how those concessionaires, again, have this kind of open or closed tagging system, providing a really easy ability for users to browse restaurants, retailers, and understand where they can go to grab a sandwich before their flight or such, as well as making sure that we incorporate, again, those revenue driving tools and high level goals for the airport. So really making sure we're bridging content to allow users to order ahead and, again, build opportunities for the airport down the line based on those gains. So in terms of how that translates, again, looking at a design that both really bridges the ability to leverage that dynamic data stream of which flights are, what the last flight time is for different parts of the airport, or how that engages with the kind of ordering ahead aspect of driving revenue based on that kind of browsing experience. And doing this in a way that's really mobile forward. So thinking about creating content and creating components that not only highlight kind of that dynamic content, that dynamic information around the status, the open close status, but thinking about what that experience is like for passengers in person and leveraging some of that wayfinding that people experience as they navigate the airport. So thinking about how individuals use signage and really elevating that kind of wayfinding. So things like knowing that a certain restaurant is by a gate. So we're really leveraging that in-person wayfinding, allowing users to use signage around the airport to kind of navigate to relevant retailers. This approach also gave us the ability to really further another one of the goals for the airport, which was leveraging and really highlighting some of the different direct flights and direct destinations. So, for example, we're really looking at incorporating the airlines as a content type and content format within the site, thinking about ways of adding points of contact components, giving an ease of ability to add really specific types of individuals to call. So not only a general kind of point of contact form, but something that allows the ability to easily add a point of contact for canceled flights or lost luggage or guest services, as well as bridging this information to the map data and really incorporating this information in the airlines check-in desk, baggage claim, guest services, with the ability to bridge that data and bridge that content to the map. And importantly, looking at how we elevate the nonstop flights across the site. So creating components that dynamically feature different types of content that are really important to the organization's long-term goals of driving users to that content, elevating the ability to book direct flights. So again, in kind of final design format, really looking at very leveraged, very kind of visually consistent, creating really concise content for reusing these direct flights, direct destinations, and elevating that design across the site, as well as kind of connecting the locations, creating clear connections between the map, the in-person wayfinding, and the directions in that capacity, as well as, again, those points of contact components, and really making it easy to create clear ways for users to engage and reach out when when they're in a crisis situation or having a situation happen in their experience. Again, this is really starts to be kind of handed off in terms of how we build our components, thinking about concise teasers, different types of again, this is your toolkit for building pages. So adding components, adding information pieces like job postings, which bridge everything from a job posting for a VP of marketing to a cashier for a restaurant, and thinking about how can we format data and create components that allow for really flexible use of fields and flexible use of information, but doing so in a way that feels visually consistent and creates a really compelling design language. So in general, just to kind of summarize what we just looked at and some of the key takeaways that I would recommend kind of building on. So components can really be a flexible tool for creating content with a consistent design language across your site. This can really elevate your brand's digital footprint, create that consistency that drives brand recognition. They can be used for stylized storytelling to guide users through the ideal user flow to key points and CTAs. So creating those featured links, those different types of really visually compelling components that guide users to where we want them to arrive on the site, regardless of where they really kind of start from. Components can be used to bridge different types of content together, ensuring that relevant and up-to-date information appears in the right locations. We're seeing that with things like the open close retailers or the point of contact for that different type of content in EDF. And components can be used for stylized storytelling. Oh, that is not. Let's see if that is not the right thing. My last point, just to say, is that it's used for, it's used for ideal. Sorry, this is totally not right. Components can be used to really kind of elevate your mission, is what's intending to say, and ensure that you can really tell your story in a way that's designed consistently, but also really creates a story that drives users where we want them, and in a way that tells your brand story, tells it in a way that can consistent but easily reusable for authors across the site.